Hello, Bill. I'm Ben Sweat, the Executive Director of Early Engagement, and I have the honor and pleasure to be talking with my colleague, Bill Monro, today. So, in the big picture, you described to me that there are sort of these big lumps of interventions in fatherhood programs, but I guess overall, how would you describe them?
I tend to think of and to group interventions by the mechanism in which they claim to make a change. A lens that I like is inside out or outside in. That means the direction of the change. Are you trying to impact somebody's inner process, cognitive processes, so that they will then change their exterior, their behaviors, their actions, the way they exist in the world? Or are you trying to change their actions, their behaviors, which will then result in a inner change?
As you've told me, outside in programs work, right? Like I say, here's 50 guys who are depressed. We can work with them on that. What are other sort of examples or the mechanism of outside in as we see it in father programs?
So usually parents aren't thinking, you know what I need? I need somebody to tell me how to parent.
Yeah.
Usually parents are saying, I'm in real trouble here. I'm out of my league. I'm running into something with my child that I never anticipated. Things aren't working. I need help.
I run these fatherhood programs, and a lot of the people who come to me have a problem. And they're like, I'm losing my shit. My kid is throwing food. The kid has these terrible screaming tantrums. I don't know what to do. And I always, first off, I'm so happy to see them. But I also think, wow, if you and I had spent a half an hour together like a year ago, you might have felt what's going on here. And the problem has already appeared often with an outside-in program.
You have to think of what is bringing somebody to a program, and
Yep.
often it's a problem. It's a problem that brings them in. They have a need. They want help. There's another category. A lot of interventions are also created understanding that especially unfortunately programs for fathers, understanding that the fathers or the mothers will be compelled by the child welfare system.
Court ordered.
If you don't,
Totally outside in, right? It's like,
it's like follow the rules.
Yeah.
Don't do these things so you can keep your kids.
Do that.
To summarize, the pros of an outside-in approach are accessibility. It's targeted towards something specific, and you can clearly see the impact.
Super measurable.
Super measurable, but also they are often pretty fast in terms of the change. Right?
So when do outside-in programs not work?
One drawback is that you have to identify a specific problem or be identified, and then you have to choose to enroll in this. So if you do not think that there is a problem with your parenting, or you do not think you're the type of person that needs help,
Why would I sign up for an outside-in approach? A thing that you brought up was like, well, is he sort of inside ready, so to speak?
often outside-in approaches do not address the motivation to change. You were doing whatever you were doing for a reason. If that reason was lack of information, then it will probably stick. But if we're honest with ourselves, that's not the most common reason why we're doing something that we would rather not be doing. If their identity as a father is not a big driving force in their life, they are less likely to be interested and engaged in an outside-in approach, because I think that there are two things at play. So one, they don't really see that there's a problem.
The problem is I have to go to these stupid classes.
Right.
When you want to change behaviors, right? When you read about people changing their habits, there's this huge identity component. Like, I am a person who exercises. I am a person who cares about his children. I am a spouse who can communicate with my spouse. And I think what we try to do, which is so important, is trying to get the guy first and say, okay. And I honestly, I say this to people and they believe it. And I believe it too. It's like, you know what? You're a dad who cares. You're a guy who's paying attention and knows what's going on. And part of that is to know that, like, becoming a dad can be traumatic, right? And can require, it's brutal, it can be brutal, right? And so, for example, your attitude towards seeking mental health support, if you wait and you go in and you're going to this outside-in thing where you're like, okay, how to manage your yelling, that's fine. But maybe 6 months before, you could be like, you know what? I'm feeling myself losing my shit. I got to talk to someone, and it's okay to talk to someone.
I think that outside in absolutely has its place, but
Yeah.
I don't think that outside in alone addresses what to me is the most important issue, and that is men seeing themselves as a father and having these strong kind of identity pathways of like, I am somebody who cares about the safety of my family. I am somebody who cares about the connection that I have with my wife and the connection that I have with my children. I am somebody who will be one of the reasons that my child is successful.
The research is very clear that father engagement supports confidence, supports curiosity, supports resilience, supports self-knowledge, supports relationship skills. I mean, these are just facts, right? And what I'm always saying to people is, mental health, fine. This is mental wealth, right? This is like shit that's in the bank, like financial wealth. And the mental wealth is the same thing. It's like, it compounds.
A brief pre-baby program can just address some of those things. And then the second thing that you would get out of that ideally would be, and you mentioned this before, a community of men, right? A cohort. So it's like, oh yeah, men do this. Those are these other men. Yeah. They're doing this.
Neither parent is really prepared for how their relationship is going to change. And it's incredible stress. And when the man knows about it and knows it's coming and knows what he can do about it, it's so much better for the kid. I mean, all this research says that the quality of the parents' relationship, communication of the parents' relationship, like from the beginning, drives so many things that are important. And the idea that like, let's just let them go home, and then when they go to the couples therapist and it's all effed up, that's when we're going to try to give them some communication skills. So as we say, it's a mental wellness prophylaxis, right? To be a little bit prepared. Like, this is what most men experience when they become fathers.
I think that a lot of those pitfalls that you're talking about are barriers to a positive father identity. So you get these negative associations like, wait, fatherhood means like that there's a strain on my relationship. Fatherhood means that like, I'm feeling judged all the time. Like, those are not positive associations. And so then your identity as a father can be interrupted. Yeah. And so I think that with those outside in supports of psychoeducation, of like knowing what to expect, we leave the doorway open for that positive identity formation.
Yeah. Kind of what you're saying is like, the strongest outside in is from a guy who's already had a little bit of inside out going down.
Motivation does not come outside in. It just doesn't. Like, motivation is an internal process. It's based on your desires, your wants, your needs. And if an identity is certainly a driver of a motivation to change.
So Bill, yes. Just to wrap up, the gazillion-dollar question, how does one measure the success of an inside-out intervention?
So if you were asking me to evaluate, kind of a large-scale inside-out type of intervention, I would look at the results, right? Because this is what's really hard about inside-out approaches, is that state of mind is very difficult to measure. So I would certainly do some surveys about what's about the identity of a father. There are some good instruments out there, but I would want to see if the people who were participated in these interventions went on to be involved fathers.
A measure we talked about when we had our before baby thing at UCLA was, let's talk to the moms in a control group and in this group at 6 months and in 12 months, and do they feel partnered? How do they and that's also why we like right away, like, he should do one of the first diaper changes. If he starts doing night feedings and does some of the first changing and can take the baby by himself at 2 or 3 months old, she leaves the house, even if it's arbitrary. It's just so good for him because like he's like, I can do this, and he can do it, and off they go. And the other thing that I always talk about is babies change so quickly, and we adults don't at all. And so when you get the identity part and some basic skills and basic framework inside, so to speak, when the baby is 6 months old, you are in such a good spot for what comes after. I mean,
As kids get older, they absorb the subtle cues of our identities. And if you are not identifying as a father in this internal way and acting
right.
in an external way as a father, the kid is not going to treat you that way as they get older. You're not going to be the one they go to when they get hurt. And then they're not going to be the one that calls you when they need to get picked up from a party they wish they weren't at.
Yeah.
Right? So it's all connected. I do think that father mental health is overlooked, and the impact of the father's mental health on the family system and on their relationship with the child is also really overlooked.
I've heard people say is the silent epidemic, which is paternal perinatal depression, right? So we all know about postpartum depression in moms, but 8 to 10% of dads, 1 in 10 gets floored by this. Just like knowing that your spouse might have postpartum depression. If you know this is coming, as we say, it's prophylaxis.
While fathers need both, they do need some information, they do need some explicit advice. What is often missing is the inside out intervention to help form that identity as a father that will be supportive kind of throughout their trajectory as a father, supportive to themselves, supportive to their family, to their relationship.
Bill, thank you for lending an hour of your time to share your knowledge.
Anytime, Ben. This was great. Thanks for having me.